It is a great day when we can hear from authentic leaders. And today, WBC presents the travel and hospitality industry and CEO leaders of purpose. I'm Edie Fraser, CEO of WBC. We are a movement to drive change for gender equality and diversity with 75 partner organizations, 75 sponsors, 500 change leaders on our advisory and leaders council. We are so compelled to drive change every month, every 6 months, with strong goals for 2025 and 2030 against more CEO leaders, more in the C-suite, those on corporate boards, those entrepreneurs, particularly with capital, more DEI across everything we do, more technology leaders. We are grateful to see not only CEO leaders, but that every month, along with Equilar, we produce a report on women joining public boards. And with that, we've been averaging close to 40% women, a third of those women of color, with big change on boards. We name every company and every board. The same thing with Diligent, as we work with them on companies on risk and other issues. We are so proud to see the integrated approach to leadership. And that is what's represented by the speakers today. If we looked at the travel and hospitality industry, and no one has experienced pivoting more during COVID and coming back, but with leaders that are persevering. But if we look at the integration of their boards, of the CEOs, of their executive suite leaders, of their suppliers, and of their commitment to customers and communities, we will share today where these leaders see us as purposeful leaders. Today, WBC has gotten 38 companies to step up to be companies of purpose, including Omega World Travel, Gloria. And we're thrilled to be looking at purposeful leadership. So a big thanks to Robert Reese and to Jose Silestra on our board of directors and as co-moderators of today's roundtable. What pride we have to look at your leadership in travel and hospitality. Robert, Jose?
Thank you so much, Edie. And on behalf of Jose and myself, we are very excited because, as Edie said, really companies of purpose, there is no industry like travel that has had two things. One, the people intense focus, but two, overcoming challenges and resiliency. And we are going to hear from four great leaders, from Gloria Bonin, who is the founder and president of Omega World Travel, as well as Cruise.com, from Brian Stevens, who's founding president, CEO of Conference Direct, from Christine Duffy, the president of Carnival Cruises, from Adam Goldstein, former CEO of Royal Caribbean International, also chair of Cruise Line International Association. And we're doing three things. The second is we'll have individual interviews with each. And the third is then we'll have a little bit of a panel. But first, we just want to give a rapid fire round of 1 sentence answers each. That's only about 20, 30 seconds each. And this is the question to each of you. What makes hospitality and travel purposeful? But just a 1 sentence, 30 seconds. Please go ahead first, Christine.
30 seconds. I think what makes travel purposeful is the opportunity for people to see beyond their borders, beyond their thinking, and to expose people to new cultures, new people, and experiences that really make a difference in people's lives.
Thank you. Adam?
I would say we have no choice but to be purposeful. We connect everybody. We employ about 10% of the world's population, and we face every kind of sustainability issue that is known. So we have to be.
Brian?
I think people want to connect with other people in a meaningful way. And I think that the meetings and incentive business is driven by person-to-person meetings.
And Gloria?
Well, service excellence is our mission, and that means we're all about people, bringing them up, training, exposing them to new experiences, letting them learn about dealing with others. So it's quite a journey.
And speaking of journey, you were our first interview, and Gloria, you've done what very few people in the world have done. You know, in 1972, you had in Virginia this little storefront travel agency, and then you grew Omega to be $1 billion organization. You founded cruise.com. What was the secret and the challenges of what you had to overcome to accomplish this great success?
So there are many things that I had to overcome. Of course, I had this great passion that was welling up within me because I had a great honeymoon and first anniversary on the QE2. And I had been a teacher at the time. So naturally, it was very exciting for me to think about changing careers. And I was urged to do that by a mentor. And that was my husband, who said, well, if you can't beat him, join him. So I thought, this is going to be very exciting. But it was pretty obvious to me when I first started that I had to go out and hunt for customers. And part of what my challenges were to actually get the customers to come into my little office, even though I had a gigantic sign outside. But I realized that unless I kept extending myself to the local community and going after things that maybe I was comfortable with, that I would not really make it. And of course, I needed to hire a qualifier in order to do airline ticketing. And lo and behold, I had an applicant who happened to be a 76-year-old woman. And at that time, I thought that was very old, but now I don't think it's so old because I've been in business now for 50 years, as you say. But she turned out to be a wonderful influence on me. And during this time frame, I realized that it was very exciting to have a mixture of different young people, older people, and people who maybe weren't that experienced and just came into the industry with this positive attitude. So the challenges were also to make money, to gain a customer base, and to actually convince the banks that I was a good risk if I wanted to have any kind of a line of credit. So those were hurdles there. But, you know, the industry in all is a very people-oriented industry. And that made it easier for me because no longer did I open my door. Then I found that I had wonderful representatives from the cruise lines, from the airlines, from tour operators who came to visit, and they were all out there trying to help me. And I thought, this is such a wonderful industry. It gave me a lot of confidence. And I think it's a wonderful message to people thinking about getting into travel. They came with posters and little gifts, and I thought, my heavens, they're even coming to tell me they'll do seminars and speak to customers. And it was really the start of something great. So that was a wonderful thing. And Christine should know that Carnival was one of the very first reps who came in to see me back in 1972 and 73. So it was a wonderful start. But I had other challenges, obviously, and that emerged with finding folks, training them, I needed to be trained too. I even took home correspondence courses with Astor and so forth, and developed a lot of friends. But then I found that I had to keep reaching out to customers. So it had to do with a lot of things, like coming up with the ideas that maybe you could innovate with. But I also know that, so many things that were happening in the economy was having a great impact on the decisions I made. And of course, people calling me and wondering, why didn't I have an office, an hour away that they'd like to have service, sort of encouraged me to look into other areas than, because I started in Fredericksburg, Virginia, which is a very small local area. And it was great to sort of expand by looking at smaller cities and other places where I could develop a business. And I don't think I would have had the confidence, I should say, if it was in a great big city. So there's a lot of little nuggets of advice in there, and that is to, find the right area for yourself, find the communities. If you reach out to people, they'll keep reaching back to you. And I took some risks. I was on the one of the first to actually get automation in 1978. By that time, I was doing pretty well in a second office because I followed the advice of my customers, and opened another office with Fredericksburg, and it was about a half hour away. So,
I want to interrupt, Gloria, and ask you, I just want on one sentence, because you've had tremendous success. Very few people have had. If you have one sentence of advice, you could sum it up into that. What would that advice be to people?
Well,
one sentence.
It's to be flexible, to look at to be flexible and looking at what the customer needs and what the economy is telling you is going to be okay to go after. So those are some of the things that I think are very important.
So when you're talking about being flexible, you said you had a hunt for questions. I want to take it to the other side now, because now you've really become a mentor where you're trying to reach out to people deeply. So you've 3 minutes left. What are you trying to accomplish in mentoring others and in driving more success for women in business?
Well, obviously, we'd want more success for women in business, but in giving, and also in finding that goal and achieving that goal, is also you're finding success for yourself. You're maintaining a lot of strength, and very important to keep developing and to keep people employed. Let them grow. We have a lot of diversity in the company, but in addition to that, there's a lot of opportunity to get ahead. So the whole idea is to create professionalism, to really have a strong core. We found that during the pandemic that I never wanted to in any way eliminate some of the major people who are part of our core. And that was a struggle, but that's what we did. And we were able to overcome a lot. We never really shut our doors because we maintain a customer base that was still traveling. Not great, but they were reduced in their travel needs, but we were there, and we did a lot of things through the years. So you have to keep yourself innovating. And, for me, I also try to create an entrepreneurial spirit. And that keeps people very, very in touch. They like to show that they can offer ideas. And sometimes you just have to tap into their creativity and let them, find an avenue for themselves. And that really creates a lot of loyalty. We had many people who have been here, many people in the company, over 60% have been here at least 5 to 37 years. And
Wow.
The core group is, so it's actually keeping people interested, giving them an opportunity to grow, letting them know you appreciate them is a big deal. But also I need them. I need them greatly, and they have helped me through their loyalty and their ability to just flourish. So many are so smart. I'm so happy. I feel good.
I commend you, Gloria, on the tremendous work you've done, how many jobs you've created, and how much joy you've created in the world. We're going to come back to you in the panel group, but now handing over to my partner in crime, Jose.
Thank you, Robert. Now shifting gears a little bit to the conference industry. Brian, at a time of when every industry faced a high degree of uncertainty due to the pandemic, the scale of disruption of the conference industry really stood out for us. We were just used to going to conferences 6 to 8 to 12 times a year. Can you share a little bit about how your industry was impacted by the pandemic, how it pivoted to virtual formats, where it is today, and where do you see it in the future?
Let me share a few slides with you that would give you a pretty good explanation. Do you see this right now?
Yes.
Okay, am I sharing it properly? Let's see. If I were to just give you an example, in terms of where we were in 19 and where we are now, we're seeing almost as well, pretty close to the numbers we had in terms of room nights. We're actually a little bit down from a normal year 19 compared to right now. So we're doing about 2.5 million room nights versus 2.8 million in a regular year. In terms of men and women, and I'll talk about this a little bit further, we are 71% female, and a lot of that has to do with lifestyle reasons. They can be their own bosses. There's no ceiling. There's no glass ceiling. There's no limit on how much you can earn, similar to the real estate model. Flexible work hours, which are attractive to people who are raising families. The ability to multitask, so they, in many cases, are soccer coaches and also professionals in the meetings business, and they can work remotely, which has been our motto ever since for the last 24 years. So that's been very handy, given the fact that we couldn't go to an office, as you all know, for about 20 months, and we had to shut down our offices. So to say that we had a heart attack would be accurate. The amount of cancellations were catastrophic. It was almost illegal in some cases to meet. So we would go to Vegas and they'd say, you can only have 50 people in a room. So sometimes we'd get 3 rooms with 50 people each, and we'd get in trouble, because we wanted a 150 person meeting. But now things are lightening up. And I think the good news for us is that we have a flexible workforce, and we also have a lot of people who stayed on. We literally did not lose many folks during COVID. And part of that is that there really wasn't a lot of opportunities for them to go elsewhere. So a lot of people dug into their, I'll call it their savings accounts to stay on board. But I will say this, relative to the number of people who are on the call right now, who are young and looking for opportunities, the hotel industry, and I'm referring to the segment of sales and marketing and convention service, they lost about 80% of their workforce in 2020. And that created an enormous divot in the workforce. And similar to other recessions, if we look back on if we look back on the Gulf War, I know there's a couple of people that remember that on this call. And there was a rifting of people out of the hotel employed side. What happened was that it created, when we came out of that recession, it created an enormous amount of opportunities. And I think that the I'll call it the baby boomers that were sort of in the way in the hotel business have retired in many cases. It was, they had 25 years with Marriott and they were 60 something. That was a magic number. And we're talking about not 100, 200, we're talking about 18,000 people left those jobs. So we see right now, probably the sales departments in hotels are probably about 60% full. And so there's a tremendous amount of opportunity on the hotel side, as well as on, I'm going to call it the third party side or the intermediary side. It's almost incredible how much opportunity is available right now. And I think, what I'm so thrilled about with Edie's remarks about equality and commitment to women in the workforce, there's never been a better time for women in the workforce than right now.
Yeah, and thank you for that. Very good news indeed. And you mentioned, there's 71% women in Conference Direct, and I assume that's standard for the industry and the conference industry, but not necessarily, that similar representation at the top of the organizations. Can you tell us if there's any opportunity, given where we are today, for women to really move up the ranks and take on more leadership positions?
Well, I think that, so I think in the last 3 years, we had a little bit of a disruption. Well, let me back up. So we had a women's conference only for women at Conference Direct to promote women and make them, I guess, feel a part of sitting at the board table, right? And then all of a sudden we hit this COVID mixed with George Floyd, and we went right into this DEI concern. And I hate to say it, but I think that a lot of us had two problems. We had a lack of women leadership combined with a lack of equality in terms of even our workforce. And so we pushed, we put that in high gear, and like a lot of industries, you started to see where the DEI message is something very high on the agenda. Recently, coincidentally, I attended the American Society of Association Executives Board of Directors, and I would say probably 70% of the persons were people that were in a diverse category, whether or not they were women, LGBTQ, or perhaps a minority that you wouldn't think of necessarily Asian, maybe Hispanic. I mean, it was like the UN, and I think that what we're seeing is a lot of right sizing going on. I'll tell you a little secret. We hired a search firm in Texas to look for a CFO for us, and we said to the search firm, you have to hire someone of color or someone who's a woman. And they said, that's illegal. And they fired us. And so we went out and found our own female to be our CFO. And, but it was interesting because a lot of the search firms are they're very careful about when we use the word DEI and mean it, they look at it as a more narrow search.
Yes, well, we can connect you to some search firms that will help you in that category. And Edie is definitely very connected in that space as others. But thank you so much for your comments. I want to turn it back over to Robert to hear from the next panelist.
Well, thank you, Jose. So this is Christine Duffy, the president of Carnival Cruise Line. So let's just start off. You had a real challenge that you overcame to get yourself, and what a great story that you told me before about how you got there, the challenges you had to overcome to get to your position. Just share that, because it's truly inspiration to, I think, everyone who wants to succeed and overcome obstacles.
Well, let me say, I know Gloria, Mega World Travel, back when I had started my career early as a receptionist at Rosenbluth Travel, when I wasn't tall enough to become a Pan Am International flight attendant. I quickly took a job at McGettigan Partners, which was a retail travel agency at the time with a big focus on group. We moved into corporate meetings and events, over time grew the company. And, I guess it's clear, I started at the bottom, worked my way up. I knew Brian Stevens very well when he was head of sales at Hilton Hotels. McGettigan, we were a big client. And ultimately, over a 20-year period, McGettigan grew through both organic growth and acquisition. I became president of the company, and then we were later acquired. We sold the business to Maritz. So it was quite a journey, but at a point in time, as Brian was talking about, the changes we've seen in the industry and crisis in particular, the 2008 financial crisis, when President Obama said people shouldn't be taking trips to Las Vegas, was another moment in time that really impacted the meetings and event and conference business. And I made my way to Washington with members of U.S. Travel. And it's interesting because I'm currently finishing up my 2-year term as chair of U.S. Travel. But with U.S. Travel, we, went to Washington and we really advocated on behalf of the industry. And that's where I really got a much better understanding of how important the industry is overall. And also that we were not speaking with one voice collectively, and that members of Congress really didn't hear from the industry except when we had a problem. And so I had the opportunity to then take on a role as president and CEO of CLIA, which Adam Goldstein, somebody that was also very involved with U.S. Travel in its former iteration as TIA. And then Adam, of course, being CEO of Royal Caribbean, was on our executive committee when I served as CEO of CLIA, Cruise Industry Association, a global trade association. And then ultimately, that's how I was tapped for the opportunity to become president of Carnival Cruise Line.
Well, congratulations. There is some long haul. And if there's one word that got you through all of it, what was that one word?
I think it's hard work. I mean, I'm very passionate about what I do. I believe that the work that we've done in the industry, whether I was in the meetings business, in retail travel, running a company, advocating on behalf of the industry, all of my work over the decades has been in this industry: hospitality, travel, tourism. I serve on the board of Herschend Entertainment, which is theme parks, attractions, aquariums, Aimbridge Hospitality, third-party hotel management company. I am a big believer that this industry matters. It makes a difference in people's lives. It drives economic impact. It creates jobs. And in particular, opportunity, I think, for not only women, but people of color. And I think, as Brian said, at this moment in time, where we know we do not have enough workers to fill the jobs that we need in our service economy, it's a great time for younger people to think about being part of this great industry. And I think in this industry, someone like me, can start at the bottom and work their way to the top through hard work and perseverance.
Okay, so you've about a little over a minute left. When you talk about young people entering the industry, chances are they're not going to face the challenges, the crazy challenges that you had during the pandemic. So just give a snapshot of what it was like. You've 30,000 people, and all of a sudden your boats are closed, but you still have to actually pay for them to keep them going. Notice there's no atrophy. It's a crazy business. How did you approach the tough decisions you had to make, and what advice do you have to people on that?
Well, I hope no one ever has to go through what we've all been through coming out of this pandemic, but you're right. The cruise industry was the only industry, as far as I know, in the world that was completely shut down for over 16 months. And I think the only thing you can say is, you know, every day we focus on what we could control, which was not always much, but the safety, security, and support for our team members, ship and shore, but particularly across the fleet of ships, as we worked very hard to be able to get everybody home, including to countries that did not accept their own citizens for a year, that remained on our ships. So it was certainly a time where communication probably mattered more than anything else that we could do as leaders. Even when we had nothing new to say, communication was important. It was so critical for people to hear from us and to understand what we were doing.
Well, thank you, and I commend you on making it through it and being in a solid position now. And back to you, Jose.
Thanks, Robert. The title of this session is Purpose in the Travel and Hospitality Industry. So I want to shift focus and ask you, Adam, as chair of the Cruise Lines International Association, what impact, if any, did purpose play during the pandemic?
There's a lot of opportunity for the cruise industry and the travel industry, generally speaking, to speak with purpose and have an impact. Because what we see in the world is barriers being put up all over the place between countries and continents and different political attitudes. And yet we have the opportunity to continue to build bridges. We see all kinds of companies, people, governments not acting as they should or could be acting. That was, I would say, exacerbated by the pandemic, not helped by the pandemic. It was a real opportunity for the world to come together. In some ways it did, in many ways that it didn't. But I think that travel companies and cruise companies in particular have the opportunity to demonstrate by their actions and their behavior that they can do right by their customers, they can do right by their employees, they can do right by the communities that they visit. And as I think I briefly mentioned at the opening, we have an extraordinary opportunity when it comes to different aspects of sustainability, of ESG. That includes the opportunity to promote gender diversity. It includes the opportunity to lead the entire maritime sector in finding alternative and new ways of using energy to move ships across the water that is not only beneficial for the cruise sector, which is a very small part of maritime, but would have knock-on effects to all of maritime. So I think that the pandemic period has highlighted both the opportunity and the ability of the cruise sector and the travel industry to have a benign influence on the world. And I really hope that the leaders that will be taking over in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years will seize that opportunity and make the most of it, because there really isn't a more visible sector than we are. Oops. Sorry, can't hear you.
Oh.
There we go.
And we're just heading into the travel season. So, you know, when we prepared for this session, you shared a little bit about how you promoted the first woman hotel director, as well as the first woman captain overseas. Can you tell us a little bit about that, as well as why this isn't enough?
I learned a valuable lesson, probably again, in the lead up to this panel. After I was graciously invited by you all to participate, I was talking about this with some of my female friends, and I had mentioned that I was the first person about 20 years ago to make several women hotel directors. And then later on, the first leader of one of the large brands to make a woman captain of a cruise ship. And also, again, 20 years ago, the first person to make a number of our Caribbean leaders who had become chief housekeeper or other top positions within the hotel operation, actually the hotel directors of their ships. And I was very proud of that. Interestingly, the response I got in this conversation was not like congratulations or anything like that. It was, yeah, but what did it do for your business? And I thought that that was a really powerful thing for them to say and for me to hear, and actually for everybody to hear, because there's a narrative that can be easily constructed in many companies throughout the travel agency community, throughout the cruise lines and the hotel companies, that your business is simply better off if you tap into the expertise and the capability of everyone around you. And compartmentalizing and limiting different types of people is not going to get you where you want to go. And this was true before the pandemic, during the pandemic, it will be true after the pandemic. It doesn't really have to do with that. It just has to do with, at any given moment in the life of a business, how do you maximize your chances of reaching your goals? And it's pretty clear that one of those ways is to leverage diversity and inclusion to get everybody involved. And particularly in our industry, which not only cuts across all nationalities, ethnicities, and religions, but which is a prodigious employer of women and people of color. And the only way, like if you look at Africa, which has, where all the world's population growth over the next 50 or 100 years is going to come from Africa. And you have an extraordinary opportunity for those countries to remove themselves from lives of poverty, to show off the traditions and cultures and attributes that they have. I'm just picking on this one example, but it's a really important one for the rest of the century. And it's going to be women and people of color that make that happen. And anybody who's involved in a leadership position today should be helping to set that foundation.
Well, it sounds like you have a very positive view of the future as it relates to gender parity and diversity.
Well, I'd like to think that I do, but I think it's also important to recognize that it can go either way. You know, this is a world without mercy, right? So if you don't do the right things, don't exhibit the right behaviors, don't be inclusive, it's going to have a profound negative impact on your business. It's not like you can just hide and say, well, I'm not going to participate in that aspect, because everybody's watching. That's what it means to be visible. My point is simply that there's an incredible opportunity for the industry and for the companies in the industry to benefit and seek profit and enable great careers and bolster communities if they take advantage of what's available to us.
Well, that's a great end note as we move towards having a more of a roundtable discussion to look at some of those actions and commitments that can be made to make sure that some of the things that you're saying will come true. Robert, I'm going to turn it over to you to start that discussion.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jose. And so let's talk about that word Jose just said, action. Who can give a bold action that people could take to drive, to help unleash the spirit of the individual as only diversity can do?
Okay, so I'll start. I think that has to do with the kind of attitude you have in what is your philosophy in your company or wherever you work. And that is, I think that a leader needs to create that feeling of innovation and an entrepreneurial spirit, because it has to be positive and can do. And it has to be one that really recognizes what an individual can do. Sometimes people don't realize what they can do. So we also have to be a little bit of a mentor for sure in evaluating what really might be something that would be great for a person, and maybe give them a chance at something they never thought was possible, as long as you are there and you give them the confidence that you're going to back them up. But I think that that is really key. And many times we also have to mold a job towards somebody's personality, their positive aspects. So there's a lot of fine tuning that is involved with raising a staff. It's almost like raising children in some ways, but because there's so many different things that customers are looking for, and we have so many different types of customers, nobody is really exactly the same. They kind of want some similar things, but it's very important to look for qualities in people and take that time. So you really need a very good HR department, and you really need to be dedicated to that goal if you're going to be the leader, is my opinion.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think that if we're talking about advancing, I'll call it women and minorities, they have to see themselves in the C-suite. And, you know, we've got, you know, Christine is an example of a trailblazer. She started like John Pino at I think John was in the mailroom and you were at the front desk. You know, not by design, but I happen to be gay, and I didn't think of my business partner straight, and we're not a gay company. But we, over 25 years, we ended up attracting our top performers are in the LGBT community. And I'm talking about people that are making $3 and $4 million a year, personally. And what I found was that they felt safe here. They felt like, you know, they're not going to get fired because they're queer. And I think that, you know, Christine is an example, or Charlotte St. Martin, or some of the other, you know, Christy Hicks, some of the other leaders that are female, people were drawn to them to work for them because they thought maybe I could get their job someday. And I feel like the answer to this question is in hiring the right C-level people that are of color, diversity, female, where people see a career path that is mentored by someone who's got the job they want.
Thank you. You'll say, on to you.
Yeah, and I think we've discussed a lot about the next question around achieving gender and diversity and parity. I think, you know, I'd like to turn a little bit into, you know, how can this industry continue to thrive under greater gender parity and diversity when it comes to innovation and, you know, and some of the things that the travel and hospitality needs to do to become more innovative. I'd like to just open that up, and how you see gender and diversity playing a role in that innovation.
I think we'd all agree that part of what we get with diversity is different ways of thinking, different ways that people look at problems and how they solve them. And I think as an industry, we are very diverse. I mean, I started a women's leadership initiative. Brian will remember this with me with MPI back in the 90s, because the reality is there are more women that work in this industry than men, yet at the C-suite, there were very few women, which is, you know, you talk about Charlotte St. Martin, who was general manager of the Lowe's Anatole Hotel in the early days. And I think there is a real view of inspiring other women or people of color or minority to believe that they too can get there, but they have to be able to see themselves. Now, we need to see more of that, but the only way for that to happen is by bringing people into this industry who are able to work their way up into the C-suite. And we just haven't had the funnel or the pipeline that we need to see that more diversity and balance at the top of organizations. I think we're starting to see that. I mean, the cruise industry, if you think about Lisa with Celebrity CEO, Jan Schwartz with Princess, myself now with Carnival, I actually believe that this industry is much more friendly and there's a greater opportunity. But once you get beyond diversity, it really is about equity. And how do we ensure that we're not just putting people in roles to be symbolic, and that we're actually giving them a voice, not just a seat at the table, and that they actually can contribute in a way that is meaningful and authentic. And so I think we've got more work to do there. The cruise industry is probably one of the most diverse. If you look at our shipboard employees, and Adam can speak to this, over 110 countries represented. We've got we can check the box on being diverse. We've got a lot more work to do on equity and inclusion, and how does that really come together in organizations and in decision and leadership.
Yeah, I just wanted to build on that and say there are two huge areas, at least of many probably, where I think greater diversity and inclusion will directly impact business performance. One is in the definition of the customer experience now and in the future. I mean, for one thing, women are huge drivers of the purchase decision across the vacation world. And obviously having more women executives in the travel companies that are delivering those vacations is going to be beneficial to making sure that the attributes of the experience are matching up with what people are looking to purchase. And the second one is resilience. The pandemic showed powerfully that companies and industries and countries didn't have the level of resilience that maybe we thought that we had. And I think it's going to take a more diverse and inclusive workforce and executive leadership going forward to make sure that we aren't always trying to get by with the absolute least minimum that we can get by with while we're succeeding at the moment, and have a better preparation for curveballs that come at us that we didn't know that they were going to happen until they did.
This is Gloria. I'd also like to say that, the industry is so diverse itself, also in the opportunities it offers in many different aspects. I mean, you can be almost anything in the travel and hospitality industry. So it's far ranging, and it's not just, working at a service desk or answering calls and so forth. It's multifaceted, and you can be an accountant, you can be a teacher, you can be a salesperson, you can be a writer, you can be a tour guide, you can be a lot of things. Wonderful. You can even be a doctor on board a cruise ship. But it's open to a lot of different backgrounds and people. And I like to remind people of that. I like to say, even if you're coming in as a junior and you're a trainee, there's a wonderful world here for you to discover in your career ladder that you're going to embark on. So I love that. And of course, I am happy that I started on my diversity best practices back in 1998, where it's fortunate because Edie Frazier is in the Washington area. I got to know her. But it has really made quite a difference in the way I've looked at people and how I've worked with my customers, which are far ranging from corporate to government to leisure to a lot of different meetings, incentives, and so forth. So I think that we really need to understand what it means, what are the best practices, and to understand that we're not one-dimensional. We have a lot of opportunity.
Thank you. I have a final question, Robert, unless you want to go.
All yours, Jose.
Well, I'm curious, the last 3 years and with the pandemic, I just want to know what you've learned as an industry, and hopefully we will not have another pandemic, but what have you learned so that the next crisis, if there's a crisis that comes up, you're able to respond much more quickly and efficiently?
I'll go. I learned that if you can redeploy your staff to some other profitable endeavors, or maybe just break even. But I think the biggest mistake we've made is, and I say we as an industry, we literally took these very loyal people and we sent them away. And I would say there was a cleansing that took place. There was a lot of fat that was removed. It was easily removed. Do you really need 2 directors of communication? Do you really need 7 people in HR when you're not recruiting? And so there was some of that, but I would say in retrospect, I'm ready for the next go around, if we have one, to try to save as many people as we can, because retraining and rehiring is enormous, and I don't think anybody's really put a pencil to it. It was far easier to retain someone than to retrain a new person. That's what
I
That's a
agree.
good-
And we found that our customers needed us so badly, even though they weren't necessarily buying, but they needed all kinds of guidance, and they needed updates. So it reestablished a lot of good rapport with existing people. But as far as our employees were concerned, it really showed who was really loyal, and it showed that people appreciated what we were doing for them by maintaining their health coverage and so forth, and allowing them to work a little bit more. But I will say that it also taught me that I was very glad that I had saved for a rainy day. I just didn't know I was going to have and be involved in what I consider to be an avalanche of problems. And but that was very important. And very often when you're in a private business like mine, you really have to maintain a strong background and be able to step up to the plate and take care of your people. I found that customers, I don't know, they were very interested in what was happening all the time. And of course, we have to congratulate the cruise industry too, for really taking a great step in trying to come up with advanced ticketing for different cruises far out into 2024. I will also say to all the industry that they did a great job in trying to upgrade, like the hotels and so forth, car rental companies, to ensure that there would be safety in travel. So it was a tremendous experience, because we all have a certain interdependence on each other in our industry. The agency communities are facilitators that help the customer while they participate in all these wonderful experiences when they take a trip. So I feel even more grateful, as a result. That's my end remark about the pandemic. We're just moving forward now, but learning a great lesson, and how we're going to move forward is a little bit questionable. And particularly when I talk to corporations, where everybody's now trying to grapple with the work at home issue. So that's going to be continue to have a big impact, I do believe, on the meetings and incentive business.
A couple of things that I'm sure we've learned. One is we can endure much more than we thought possible. If anybody had said before 2020, well, what would happen if the industry were ever not able to operate for 16 or 18 months? We would have said, well, I guess there goes our industry. But in fact, it's at the moment ready to thrive again. And the second thing is we learned that we hadn't done a good enough job, especially vis-a-vis the political world, getting them to understand that we are an ecosystem of small and medium-sized companies. The political world understands us as 3 or 4 big public cruise companies, but that's a complete misapprehension of who we are and where the employment is in our ecosystem. And that the burden was falling on small enterprises, not big enterprises. Yes, they were suffering too. But we now know that we need to do a much better job of getting that across.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for that.
I'll echo what Adam has said. I think not only were the companies, I think our people are much more resilient than what we give them credit for. And I think sometimes as leaders, we think we need to have all the answers before we get in front of people. And I think I learned that being transparent, even when we didn't have new news or good news was more important. It was more important to be out in front as much as possible. People needed that. It built trust. And at one point, you know, having to tell our crew members that were waiting for news about what was happening. I mean, remember, we had from the CDC 12 times the pause was extended. And again, we had no idea when we were shut down in the US that it could ever possibly go for that long. So telling our crew members that if you could get a job at home, you should get a job, because we really just do not know when we are going to be able to resume operations. That was tough. But now that we've restarted, the ships are full, the fleet is back. You know, what I hear from our crew members was that they valued that communication, the honesty, and the commitment, that they knew the work that we were doing, particularly in Washington as an industry, to be heard and better understood. Because as Adam said, we impact not just the cruise ships and people who work directly for the cruise lines, but every one of these port communities, our travel partners, many of our suppliers, everybody suffered through the shutdown of the cruise industry during this pandemic.
Well, thank you for that. Edie, I'll turn it back to you.
Well, can we thank is Robert Jose, and what great learnings that we've had today from these four leaders of the industry. And Christine, as you end with the perseverance and leadership and the integrity and the voices, and we learned that the industry is not just the big players, but the small players, and how important that voice is. Gloria, when you talk about the wonderful world of this industry and the entrepreneurial spirit and the innovation and the customer service, and is Brian, as you talk about the industry, 71% female, but the way to pivot, it's been so important, and to concentrate even what we can do to build the C-suite. Christine, you are truly talking about hard work and perseverance as you go, and the flexibility. And to Adam, you've really showed the equity and people of color and the sensitivity going from purpose to ESG and the endurance and doing the right thing. So from all four of you, what a tribute to the travel and hospitality industry and your leadership. For those in the chat, you've put together such accolades of these, but you've also asked questions like, what are we doing for disability in the industry? And what is the future in terms of the potential of the workforce? But why don't we say we will read all of your comments, but at this point, it's just big accolades to realize the power of this industry and the leaders that are sensitive to their workforce, to their customers, and to their communities. So on behalf of WBC, thank you.
Thank you.